Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from OnlinePhotographyTraining.com. Welcome to my free training on On1 Photo RAW 2019. Over the past several video series that I've done, I've been in the habit of calling the first video in the series Quick Start. I do that because I know that some of you don't want to watch 14 or 15 videos to learn in detail all the functionality of an application. Some of you just want to get an idea what the application can do, and you want to see some of the major features, and then you're going to go in and root around for yourself. So the first video of the series, and this series specifically, is just an overview. I'm going to show you some of the major features. We're going to navigate to where an image is on my computer. We're going to process it, and then we're going to export it as a JPEG to share. So doing the video this way, though, may lose some of you because I'm going to be going quickly and I'm going to really bypass a lot of the functionality. But those of you that want more detail, stay with the series because in subsequent videos, and I'll be doing around 2 videos a week, I'll go into much greater detail and we'll cover all the functionality of the application. And On1 Photo RAW 2019 is really a feature-rich application. You could do a lot with it. I'll compare it to Lightroom. For instance, in Lightroom, you have the library module, the develop module, and the print module. You could pretty much do all the functions in those modules of Lightroom in On1 Photo RAW 2019. In Photoshop, you have layers, layer masks, blending. You could do all that in On1 Photo RAW 2019. Also, in an application like Luminar, where you have filters and you have filter effects, On1 Photo RAW 2019 has an effects module, and you could do pretty much similar things that you could do in Luminar with On1 Photo RAW 2019. So, again, it's a super feature-rich program. There's a lot you could do with it. Now, when you first open On1 Photo RAW 2019, you'll be in the Browse module. And the Browse module is akin to Lightroom's library module. And I will refer to Lightroom now quite a bit because I know that many of you are experienced in Lightroom and you're looking for a Lightroom alternative. So the Browse module is similar to Lightroom's library module. And in the Browse module, you could star and color label, you could rate your images, you could come in and cull them, you could anything you could think of you could do in the library module, you pretty much could do in the Browse module, add keywords and things like that. Now, the key difference between Lightroom and On1 Photo RAW 2019 is how you get your images into the application. Those of you that are familiar with Lightroom know that you just can't browse to an area on your computer that has an image and start editing it. You have to formally import that image into Lightroom, and that's a process. With On1, you can import images off your memory cards into On1, but you don't have to. You could just navigate to wherever the image is on your computer. And when you're in the Browse module, if you look over on the left-hand panel, you'll see some areas of your computer that may or may not contain images. And this makes it easy for you to navigate to those areas. So at the top, you'll see there's local drives. And on this computer, I have one internal hard drive. That's called the Macintosh hard drive. And then I have 4 external hard drives plugged into this machine. I have one that I've called Lightroom. That's an external hard drive. I have one that's called Media Server. I have one that I've called Morganti Drive, and I have another one I've called Video Drive. So if I have images on any of these drives, I could just click on it and drill down to that image and just start working on it. I don't have to formally import the image into the application. Now below that we have cloud locations. I have Dropbox, Google Drive, and OneDrive. So if I have images on any of those cloud locations, I could just navigate to the image there via these links. Below that, I have my phone. I could navigate to images on my phone. Now, over on the left-hand side, far left, we have some kind of like quick links to a lot of areas. At the top, we have the desktop. If you have images on your desktop, you could just click on that and go right to the desktop. Below that, we have the Pictures folder. So wherever the Pictures folder is on your computer, you could click there and hop right to the Pictures folder. Below that, we have cataloged folders. In On1 Photo RAW 2019, the images are on your computer somewhere. They're usually in a folder. You could access them, work on them fine. You don't have to import them or anything like that. But if you choose to catalog that folder, it doesn't take up any significant disk space when you do that, but it will allow you to access that folder much more quickly, and the images will render much faster on your screen if you catalog a folder. I found, because my computer's fairly fast, that I don't see much of a performance difference between a catalog folder and a folder that isn't cataloged. So it's really up to you whether or not you want to catalog a folder that you often use. And in a subsequent video, I'll show how to do that. Now, below the catalog folders, we have our local drives, and these are all these drives right here that we have there. And below that, we have the cloud services. And then below that, we have albums. Now, I have no albums set up on this computer yet, or on my application yet. Albums are akin to collections in Lightroom. If you're familiar how to use a collection in Lightroom, an album is the same thing. So, I want to edit an image. I need to find it. Now, you can see I have a bunch of images, but I know on my Lightroom hard drive, so I'll click there. This is my Lightroom hard drive. I have two folders, and you can tell they're folders. There's a little folder icon in the lower right-hand corner. And the left-hand folder I have called Lightroom RAW files. That's my Lightroom library of all my images in Lightroom. And I created a new one next to that. That's my On1 RAW files. And you can see it's a folder, it has that folder icon. Now, I didn't have to. I'm just doing this for this video demonstration series. Whenever I do a video, I'm going to access an image from my On1 RAW files folder. And then later on, I'll show you how to catalog this folder and things like that. So that's why I did it. You don't have to keep your images independent of Lightroom. You could work on them from your Lightroom folder, but Lightroom will not recognize any of your edits that you did in On1. And On1 won't recognize any edits you did in Lightroom, so they're independent of one another. You just can, though, share the images. If I wanted to go to the Lightroom's RAW files folder, I could. But I want to go into this On1 RAW files folder, so I'll double-click on it, and you can see that I have 9 images in it. Now, whenever you navigate to any location on your computer, there's a little breadcrumb trail right here. So if I want to go backwards through my breadcrumbs, I could just click on Lightroom and I could go backwards. And so if I had a lot of nested folders, this breadcrumb trail would get relatively long, and it's easy to just jump back using that breadcrumb trail. Now, we have different views when we're looking at our images. Right now, we're looking at a grid view of images. And if we look over in the lower left-hand corner, we'll see these views down here. This is grid view. The keyboard shortcut to go into this view is G. G is in grid. Next to that, we have the detail view. And the detail view is an image, a single image. So we're going to look at this image, and maybe this is the one we'll process. The keyboard shortcut to get into the detail view is the E key. E is in Edward. Next to that, we have the film strip view. And we'll click on that. And you can see now the image is still there, our selected image, but we have a film strip along the bottom that is showing all the images that are in that specific folder, my On1 RAW files folder. And we could access the images maybe more quickly and easily right here. You can use the arrow keys on your keyboard as well if you'd like to access them that way. Now, if you'd like to compare two images, if you're culling images and you want to see which image might be sharper than the other or something like that, down in the film strip, you could click on one of the images and hold the Command or Control key in and click on the other image. And it's Control if you have a PC, Command if you have a Mac. Then click right here. This is the Compare view. And C is the keyboard shortcut to get into the Compare view. And then you could see your images. And if you wanted to add another image to Compare view, you could add more than one is what I'm trying to say. So you could add a bunch of images to your Compare view if you'd like to. Now I'm going to go back to the Detail view. I'm going to hit the E key on my keyboard. And now I'm in the Detail view. But let's just say I'd like to work on this image. Now we're still in the browse module. In the browse module, I could give it a star rating, a color label. I could like it, or I could give it an X, meaning it's a reject, and I probably will be deleting it. But in this case, I'm going to save that for a future video on how you do all that. But we need to edit it. Now, if we go over on the right side real quick, you could see that right now it's showing a navigator screen. If you're zoomed in on your image on your navigator screen, you'll have this little box. And you could take this little box and just drag it to a different location on your image. So you could maybe look closer at your image and make sure that it's in focus and very sharp. I'm going to zoom back out by clicking on it again. Next to that, we have levels. That's really a histogram. That's your histogram of the image. And to the right of that, we have info. And that's the pertinent camera info and lens info of the image. Well, I've already decided I want to edit this. So to edit this, we go to the Edit module. And if you look over at the far right, you'll see right here under Browse is Edit. And we'll click on that. And now we're in the Edit module. And the Edit module is very similar to the Develop module in Lightroom. A lot of the same sliders that do the same thing. Inside of the Edit module are 4 modules. One is called the Develop module, and I mentioned it's similar to the Develop module in Lightroom. To the right of that, we have the Effects module. Effects module is similar to Luminar, let's say, and those of you familiar with Luminar, has different filters that you could apply, and I will do some work in the Effects module on this image in a moment. To the right of that, we have the Portrait submodule of the Edit module. That's obviously if you're working on a portrait that has tools that allow you to better process a portrait. To the right are local adjustments, and that's the brush, the graduated filter, and things like that. Now, I want to just do kind of straight processing on this image. So typically, you would start with this top tab that is in the desktop section of the Edit module. And this is your typical tone at the top and color at the bottom. So, to give you a little idea, those of you not familiar with my post-processing and how I go about doing it, just let me explain very quickly. I kind of borrowed from grading film, technically grading video. And in video grading, typically what a videographer will do is they'll shoot their video so it's as flat as possible and not very saturated. And the reason why they do that is it will minimize noise, but it also, when it's flat, it'll allow them to more easily manipulate it in post and make it look like anything they want it to look like. So what I'll tend to do is I'll actually flatten my image a little bit to begin with, and then I use some other tools to bring back some of the contrast and color that is in the image. I found that works best for me. So typically what I'll do is and most people do, is we don't really go top to bottom. We'll jump around. We'll look at the image and see what it needs the most. So if this was underexposed, I would probably go to exposure right away. But let's say the shadows were just dark, then I'd probably go to the shadow slider. If highlights were too bright, I'd probably just go to the highlight slider right away. So I jump around. Now another thing you should know, that at the top of the tone and color tab is the camera profiles. And by default, you'll always be an On1 standard. And this is just how the software will interpret the settings in the RAW file and reproduce them for the screen. Meaning, right now we're looking at the image and we see specific tone, color, and contrast values. If I go over the one below that, which is On1 Landscape, just hover over it, you'll see that that will change slightly. On1 Portrait changes again. On1 Vivid changes. On1 Neutral changes. Now below that, you'll see that there's some camera profiles. Every camera will be different. And if you shoot JPEG, you won't see these. These will only be in the RAW file. So you'll see camera landscape. This is a Nikon camera. So this is the profile that Nikon has for a landscape image. There's camera neutral, camera portrait, camera standard, and camera vivid. Now these are unique to this specific Nikon camera that I used. Yours may say something different here depending on what model and make camera you used. And again, if you're shooting JPEG, you won't have these at all. Now, I'm just going to stay with On1 Standard for this demonstration, so you can see how that affects the image. Now we could come down and start processing it. Now I mentioned that I tend to make it flat first, so I'm going to remove contrast. So I look at the brightest part, and that's the highlights, the clouds up there. I'm going to take the highlight slider and I'm going to pull that down. And in doing so, it tends to tease out a little more detail in the sky. Then I'm going to go to the shadows and I'm going to open those up or move the shadow slider to the right. So I'm making the image flatter by doing this. Tonally, the image is flat. Now, if I think midtones need anything, I do that as well. Now what I'll do at this point is I'll go back to adding some contrast to the image. And usually I will do that via the whites and the blacks. So I would go to the whites, and I could move that to the right or to the left. Now, really you kind of just do it by eye. And just see what works. Now, because typically, this is just my style. Everyone's different, and I encourage you to experiment and kind of brew up a style of your own. Because I've usually brought highlights down and shadows up, I will do the opposite to the whites and blacks. I'll put whites up. When compared to shadows, it's kind of the opposite direction. And then with blacks, I'll bring those down. So you can see I'm dialing back in some of the contrast. Structure is equivalent to clarity in Lightroom. If you move it to the right, you're going to add mid-tone contrast to the image, which makes the image look sharper. If you move it to the left, you're going to be removing that mid-tone contrast. It's going to make the image look a little softer. So I'll move structure to the right. Haze, on the other hand, if you move it to the right, you're going to be introducing haze. So you can see how the clouds are getting hazed out. If I move it to the left, I am going to be removing haze, but in effect, I'm adding a lot of contrast. And a lot of times I don't care for the look of haze, and I'll leave that at 0. Now, if you ever adjust a slider and you want to quickly put it back to its default position, just double click on the name of the slider and it will go back to its default position. Now, overall, then I'll look at the unit, I'll add some contrast. I usually do contrast towards the end of this adjustments. Now, I still think it's probably a little bright, so I'm going to take whites down. I think that looks better. So I'll jump around a little bit and to get it adjusted the way I like. So I think I have the tone adjusted the way I want. Now, I should note, I forgot to, if you don't understand the sliders quite yet, you're still learning, but you want to quickly process an image, there is an auto button right here for tone. If you click auto, it will automatically adjust all these sliders in the tone section to what the software thinks is a proper adjustment for the image. Now, usually I hate what auto does. I prefer to do it myself. And like I said, you probably will too once you get to learn the software. But if you're in a hurry, auto will work. Below that, we have the color, the actual color temperature of the image, the white balance. And you can see there's a drop down here. And we have as shot, this is as the camera set it. Then we have an auto setting that the software thinks would work. We have daylight. You can see how that seemed to have warmed it up a touch. Below that, cloudy, which warmed it up considerably. Shade will warm it up even more. Then we have tungsten, and that's going to cool it down. Below that, we have fluorescent, which also is cool. We have flash. And then a custom setting is whenever you come in and adjust any of the sliders. Or if you grab this little eyedropper here, if you click on it, the eyedropper is active, and you can see our cursor is now a plus sign. What you're meant to do now is click on something in the image that is middle gray, and that is equivalent to an 18% gray card that you might have had your model hold in a photo, and then you could click on the gray card in post with this plus sign and get a perfect white balance for the lighting conditions you faced when you took the image. Now, you got to find, in this case, I had no one in the scene holding an 18% gray card, so I have to find something that's kind of an equivalent to that gray, which I'm probably not going to find. So we'll click there, and you can see now it did a custom white balance to that setting. So you could come in. Now, I think I like the as shot. I think that looks fine. Now below that we have purity, or well, I should say I'm jumping down. Uh, Below temperature and tint, we have saturation and vibrance. And saturation will affect every pixel in the image. If you move it to the right, it's going to make every pixel more saturated. If you move it to the left, it's going to make every pixel less saturated. So much so that if I move it all the way to the left, I'll have a black and white image. Now, if you have colors that are already saturated, when you move saturation to the right, it's going to oversaturate those colors. Vibrance, on the other hand, is a little more subtle. First of all, it will only bring colors to saturation and will tend not to oversaturate everything. Also, it doesn't have as much effect on reds and pinks. So vibrance would be a better choice for portraiture, because often with saturation, if you move it to the right, the model's skin will start looking too red or too pink or too flush looking. Vibrance is a better choice. So if you move that to the right, it still adds saturation to the image, but it doesn't oversaturate like vibrance. If I move it all the way down, it doesn't suck all the color out of the image. You could still see there's some color there, and it won't affect the oranges, reds, and pinks quite as much. Now, for this image, I think I'll just there's not a person in it, so I'm just going to take saturation up a tiny bit. Now, if you do find that vibrance is adversely affecting the skin, you could click this little box here and it will help hopefully reduce the vibrance on the skin. Now, if you find that you chose a white balance with the drop down, the eyedropper, or just manually move these sliders, and then you added saturation and vibrance, and now your whites don't look white anymore, you could take this purity slider and move that highlights to the right, and that will take the color out of the highlights. The more you move it, the more it will start to affect the midtones. You can see how it started to suck the color out of the building as well. Below that is shadows. That's the same thing, except it just works on the shadows. Now, I think I'm done with the tone and color tab. Below that is the details tab. This is actual sharpening and noise reduction. And a lot of times you'll find on these tabs and on every filter that you'll use in the effects module, there's some presets for that tab or filter along the top. Now, if you click on default, this gives you just these 0 numbers. So that kind of gets you back to ground zero. To the right of that, though, we have some of these presets. There's a low amount of sharpening with a low amount of luminance and color noise reduction. If I click on high, we'll get more sharpening, more luminance, and color noise reduction. There's a little drop down here with some more. There's a print option that gives you sharpening that would be hopefully work well with a print. So if you're going to print the image, you may want to use that choice. Below that is screen. If you're just going to share this online, you may prefer to use screen. That will work well there. And it also has default high and low in there as well. So let's just, for this demonstration, use screen, remove hot pixels. Sometimes when you sharpen an image, there'll be some pixels will just kind of pop out on the image. This is more prevalent with a cheaper camera, tell you the truth. But if you click that, it will help get rid of those hot pixels, or at least it lessens them. So we're done with details. Now lens correction. I have it so it automatically finds the lens I used. It was a Nikon 24-70 and it found it. And if I want to turn any of these off to see what the effect is, there's without lens corrections. And there's with lens correction. Without, with. So you could see that it performed lens corrections automatically. I could turn off detail. And you know, a lot of times too, when you're adjusting detail, the detail tab, and you're sharpening and adding noise reduction to the image, you like to zoom in. So you would click on the image to zoom in, and this will help you better see the detail and better see the noise. I should make that point. I didn't do it. Now below lens correction we have transform, and this comes in handy especially on an image such as this, where I took an image or a picture of this building and you could see that it looks like it's tilted backwards. And it's very easy to fix with the transform tab, and I'll just do it very quickly. We'll click on to turn on the tab, And I want to do a keystone adjustment. You could see falling off backwards is kind of a keystone issue. So we'll click here and it brings up this kind of very faint looking box. What this, when you're adjusting keystone, and I will go in detail this entire tab in future videos, is we need to find 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines, and we'll drag these lines over the top of those lines, and then it will correct the image. Now for this image of City Hall, there really isn't a really defined like square. There's the outside a little bit, but those are kind of far away from one, or they're kind of short, I should say. And actually, though, it works best if the image, you were doing an image that has 2 horizontal lines that are very far apart from one another and 2 vertical lines that are very far apart from one another. That's where it works best. I really don't have that here. So what I'm going to do is just do the best I can. I'm going to do, I could see that there's like this little kind of box right here. See it? So I'm going to drag these points, these little handles, over those areas. See right here. And you'll notice as soon as I drag the first one, it has a apply button right in the middle. When I'm done, I click that button. There. And then I'll grab this one and I'll come over here. And I'm just going to double check that it's going perfectly along those lines. And once I'm satisfied that it looks like I have these lines set, I'll click apply. And you'll notice that it corrected for it. Now it looks like City Hall and the monument are standing perfectly straight up and down. But in doing so, I created an issue here. Now I have these blank pixels. So what I need to do is I need to crop it. Now over here on the left-hand side, we have the tool well, and we have a lot of tools we could use here. The crop tool, the text tool, the local adjustments tool, faces tool, and mask. And we're going to go over all of these in future episodes. But right now I need to crop it. So I'm going to click on the crop tool. And along the top we have the tool attributes. And I'm going to leave it right now as a free-form crop. And I'm just going to grab this handle and pull it up, and grab this handle and push it in, and grab this handle and bring that in as well. So we've eliminated all those blank pixels. We're going to click apply, and there is our cropped image. Now it looks pretty good. So I'm really done with the develop section of the edit module, but I still want to do something else to the image. So I'm going to go to effects. And if we click on effects, this is now, remember I mentioned this, kind of, those of you familiar with Luminar, we have a lot of different filters we could add to the image. And one thing I didn't point out, when we did initially go into the edit module, over on the left we have a lot of presets. So you could come in into On1 Photo RAW and just apply a preset, and that hopefully maybe will get you done right away. And one thing I just want to add real quick, there have been a lot of people that have purchased my On1 presets for On1 Photo RAW 2018, and they can't find them when they installed On1 Photo RAW 2019. My presets, if you purchased them from me and installed them in On1 Photo RAW 2018, they work perfectly in On1 Photo RAW 2019 as well, and they're located right here where it says third-party presets. And if you click on that, you can see there's Anthony M's presets, and there they are. And then when you do a preset, you can see you have kind of these little postage stamp views of the image with that preset applied. But I'm not going to use a preset right now for this. What we're going to do, I'll just go back so that looks normal, is I do want to apply 2 different filters, just to make it very quick. 2 of my favorite filters. I'm going to click on Add Filter, and you can see this Filters dialog box pops up. And if you hover over a filter, you'll get an idea what that filter does by the picture, and it has a little explanation of what that filter does. Now, one of my favorite filters is dynamic contrast. So I'm going to click on that. And as soon as that gets applied, you could see that it did something to the image. There's before, and there's after. There's before, there's after. I like dynamic contrast so much, I often say it's worth the price of admission just to buy the software, just so you could get this filter. Now, again, as I mentioned before, that many of these filters will have little presets along the top. And right when you turned it on, it did this first one called natural. Next to that is surreal. I don't like that one at all. Soft. I don't like that one. Then under the drop down, we have a couple more. We have grunge contrast, which is hideous. That natural again. Soft again. Surreal again. Then we have this texture enhancer. And I really like the natural. But as I look at the natural, it might be just a little bit too much. Now I could come in here and I could just go to these sliders and try moving them back and whatnot. But an easier and quicker way is it has an opacity slider. When it's at 100%, this filter, 100% of this filter is being applied to the image. Well, I could just back it off. So if I back it off to 0, that's as if the filter isn't even applied at all. See, there's before, there's after. Well, I think somewhere more towards the middle is probably going to work well. So I'll put it somewhere around 50. I think that looks pretty good right there. There's before and there's after. So I think that looks good. Now I want to add another filter to this, and I want to add a vignette. So I'm going to click on Add Filter, and I'm going to go to Vignette. And it already added this natural vignette to the image. You could see. Oops, I hit the wrong one. Duh. Sorry. Let's put this back to 50. Not looking at what I'm doing. Go back to the vignette. All right, it already added this subtle, or I just added the subtle vignette to it. There's before and there's after. One of the favorites most of us like is this big softy, if you add that. And why you may want to add a vignette to the image, it helps draw your viewer's attention more towards the center of the image. So you're basically, in this case, because it's a dark vignette, just darkening the sides. And there is options to brighten the sides as well. There's individual sliders here, and I will go into detail about this filter in future videos. There are more in this drop-down, more little presets. You can see there's white ones and black ones, and there's some white vignette, white edges. But I like that big softy. I think I'll just go with that. So I'm done with the image. I think this is a nicely processed image. If you want to see a before or after, you could hit the backslash key on your keyboard. There's before and there's after. So you could see it did quite a bit to it. You also could do that down here. See where it says preview? If you click there, there's before and there's after. So it looks pretty good, I think. So we're going to export this now. And down here in the lower right hand side, you can see that there's an export button. And when I click on that, this right-hand panel will turn into the export panel. It just takes a second. It's generating a preview and rendering it. And when you have the export panel, there's a lot of different things you could do on export. First of all is photo size. I don't want to export this image in its large, format. It was shot on a Nikon D800E, which is a very high resolution camera, and I don't want that big JPEG on my computer. I just need something I'm going to share on social media. So I'm going to resize it, and I'm just going to resize the long edge to 2048. And the resolution from 300 to 72. Typically, if you're printing the image, you'd like to export the full-size image, not resize it, and you'd like the resolution to be at least 300, and you'll get a decent print. If you're sharing it online, it depends. Like Facebook resizes images to 2048, so even if you upload to Facebook a full-size image, they're going to resize it to 2048. It's better, you're better off to just resize it yourself. And then because it will look better overall if you do it yourself than if they do it. Application like Instagram, they resize it to 1080, I think, if I remember right. That's the long edge to 1080. Long edge on a horizontal, and a vertical, it's a little different, but it's not worth getting into right now. But anyway, I'm going to resize this to 2048. You could add a watermark. You could do some export sharpening if you'd like. A lot of times I'll do it and I'll just do screen low just for that. Tiling, that is if you're going to end up printing the image but you want a very large rendition, but your printer only prints smaller, it doesn't print that large. You could print blocks out and then tape them together, tile them together for your larger image. You could do a gallery wrap if you're printing and you want to stretch your image over a base. You could do it with a gallery wrap. File type, I mentioned we're going to do a JPEG. I'm going to do 80%. I think studies have shown that people cannot see the difference between a quality of 80 to 100, so I'll do that. And the color space, I am just going to use sRGB because most people's monitors can't render the colors in the other color spaces anyway, so you might as well just use sRGB. We're going to save it to a specific folder. I'm going to choose it. Then my Finder app will come up. And if you have a PC, Windows File Explorer will pop up, and I'm just going to save it to the desktop. And if prevent overwrite, if I have a file there with the same name, that would prevent the overwrite. I could rename it. I don't think we will. We'll just leave the current name. And when we're all set here, we're just going to go down here in the lower right-hand side and click Export. Now it's exporting the image. It will take a second. And when it's done, it will appear on my desktop. Okay, it did take a good 30 seconds or so for it to export the image. Here it is on my desktop. I'll just double click on it, and there's our exported image. So that's how you would quickly go into On1 Photo RAW 2019, find an image to process it, add a filter or two to it, and then export it. When you're done, you could go back to your Browse module. And if you want to see the grid view again, hit G for grid, and there's our images. And if you want to go to the film strip view, go to F for film strip. You could go through and process another one. So again, this is quick start. I know it might have left a few of you in the dust because I kind of overviewed everything. I didn't go into great detail. But hopefully for some of you, this gets you interested in the application. You could go to On1 Photo or to On1's website, and they have a 30-day trial version. It's fully working. It only will work for 30 days though. And you could give it a try and see if you like the application. And also, you see how it runs on your computer. Everybody's computer is different. And a lot of times you hear, that, I'm not saying I hear it about On1, but you'll hear the application crashes on somebody's machine or it goes too slow. But that's why I encourage you, don't buy it right away. Try it and make sure it works right for you and is running smoothly on your machine. Thank you for watching my free video training on On1 Photo RAW 2019. Please do me a favor and like and share this video. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And in the description below this video, you'll see ways that you could help me keep making free photography how-to videos. Finally, visit my website, onlinephotographytraining.com. There, you'll find over 900 videos and articles to help you with your photography. And of course, they're all free. Thank you.